Welcome, Dr. George Ackerman, to the Dish with Dina podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and sharing some information with me and our listeners. How is everything going on with you?
Good. I really want to thank you and the listeners for your time. This is not just about a podcast or a small talk. This is about a conversation that needs to go well beyond, our limited time, but just this limited time means the world to me and my family. So thank you.
This is one of my biggest forms of service is that it's not just about me. It's always about whomever I'm sharing a discussion with about the target audience, what might resonate with somebody out there. And you never know, even if just a handful of people or one person hears some information that they can take away and it helps them with whatever they're doing. That's how we advocate and empower each other to keep the message going. So thank you for letting me be a part of your mission as well. So George, we met online on the internet, if you remember, right through Threads, I think it was. This is what I love sometimes about the World Wide Web is that we get to meet people that we might not come across. Can you share a little bit just about your history of who you are and how you got to this place? And then, of course, we'll talk more about the details of your organization.
I was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey. That's a little bit too far back. I'll never finish today, but I was raised in Brooklyn, New York. My mother really sacrificed her own life to make me who I am today. She raised me and my brother. She was divorced. She was a school teacher and also had a master's in psychology, but kind of gave it up so my father at the time could go to medical school and fulfill his dreams. So I feel like, throughout my mother's life, in a way, she had so many dreams and things of her own, but she gave up so much for so many others. So she would put other people first. Unfortunately, in 15 years before she passed on 1/1/2020, she had Parkinson's disease. Just to rewind a little bit about me, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, always had a passion for helping victims of crime. It's possibly because I lived in a high crime area, and I always wanted to fight for the people who don't have a voice, a lot of the family members. Then I decided as a lawyer, so I became a lawyer. I noticed that you don't have the time to help victims of crime because in the prosecutor's office, you just have to go to the next case. So I thought, what better way to start than to go right into policing? I became a police officer, went to Miami Police Academy. It was also rough, but all these things built my character and taught me never to give up, whether it was advocacy or anything. And then I found, again, you just have too many calls. You can't help victims like you want. So I decided, why not do a PhD in criminal justice? And I actually had the honor to work with a group of African American mothers who lost their loved ones due to murder in West Palm Beach, Florida. And my whole life then was dedicated to family members of homicide victims. So in a way, that brings us from the world of advocacy in the criminal justice system for victims who lost their loved one, who have no voice, unfortunately, to the Parkinson's community. Because I felt as a caregiver, and my mother, when she was struggling, we really didn't have a voice. I felt alone, and even today, hopefully we'll get to it. They're making history right now in Congress, but before 2023, there's been no law, literally nothing in the United States for Parkinson's patients or caregivers, and that's what my goal and dream is today. Is I don't accept money, I don't accept anything, except I do accept we're all family in this fight to find a cure and end Parkinson's disease forever.
I so appreciate that. Before we kind of hit record here, we talked a little bit about some other neurodegenerative diseases. I'm somewhat familiar with Alzheimer's disease. We do have some people in my family who had suffered from it. I also mentioned a friend of mine whose dad went through ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease as well, and the caregiver's role too of having to, we're not home health aides, but we are there to take care of our family. So share with us a little bit first for anybody who's not aware how Parkinson's disease is fitting within that, I guess, that category of neurodegenerative disorders. What first are the signs and symptoms that come up, especially in your mother's case? And then how does it progress in your mom's case as well? Or maybe what you've been seeing in so many of the things that you've been doing out there to advocate for the condition?
Sure, sadly, Parkinson's disease is one of the fastest, or if not the main, neurodegenerative diseases in the world. So it's not just the U.S., it's around the world. There's approximately a million people with Parkinson's in the U.S., but 10 million throughout the world. And it's just a horrible disease. So it's so different. That's why it's tough to find a cure, because every single person is in a way treated differently. My mother didn't have external tremors like Mr. Michael J. Fox, the famous Canadian actor from many of our favorite shows like Family Ties, Back to the Future, and she had internal. So that was frustrating for her because she felt people may not believe her. On top of that, you get rigidity, so she had trouble moving her left arm, but it didn't for like about 8, 9 years. It didn't affect her where she couldn't still be independent, like I believe you said your father, and so she still lived alone, traveled, had a car, drove, went out with her friends, the pedicures and the girly things, and so that was important. But something happened so she had rigidity, but then something really crept up 4 years before she passed, my father and our family decided she should try to participate in a trial because we tried everything, like you name it. Even looking back 4 years later today, there isn't one thing we could have changed differently, nor would I have. But unfortunately, we're not sure what happened at that trial. I don't know if they changed her medication too drastically, but when she came back that night, I was called over to her house at 4 a.m. And no one trains to be a caregiver, even for your loved one. And no one, even in law enforcement, trains to show up to your mother's house when at 4 a.m. she was moving furniture out of her house and she thought there were Nazis inside that were going to harm her. And I didn't even, honestly, that was like where my heart broke that night. But that was when my journey started as her caregiver. And from that time on, it just kind of declined her health. I brought her to the hospital. They said we saved her life. She had a UTI on top of all the issues. But the worst thing wasn't even that, which was bad enough. I dropped her off at the hospital, rushed back to her house to get some clothes, and surrounding her room were little post-it notes. And I didn't even know she was doing this, but she had just gotten, I believe, late onset dementia. So she wrote names of animals and people who weren't actually in reality there. And that was, again, probably one memory that's kind of ingrained in my mind forever. And it stinks because it's like we had so many incredible memories, but those last 4 years were the toughest. And then from there, went from a cane to 2 years, from the cane to a walker, from the walker to a wheelchair. In the last 7 days, she was bedbound. So that's kind of what Parkinson did do. And lastly, she's a very healthy person. She never had really issues with anything her whole life. So that's why it really is tough because they say you don't die from Parkinson's, you die with it. But everybody, again, is, I'm sure you're familiar. And for those who aren't, it's just so different to each and every person. And the last sign at times is something called dystonia, dyskinesia, where the curling of the toes and involuntarily movement. So a lot of signs you can see. And one of my big things of advocacy is changing the perception of Parkinson's. It's not an elderly man's disease anymore. And there's just so much awareness that needs to be done. So that's, again, why I'm grateful for your time and your viewers and listeners.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you too. And I think this is the issue a lot of times, whether we personally are dealing with certain conditions or we are involved in the lives of people who have these conditions, that, like you said, there's no one size fits all. And from a healthcare provider's perspective, because I also know a lot of people that follow me and listen to this are in the health and wellness arena, students, interns, newly credentialed professionals, that we study so much in the textbooks, but it's only until we get real world experience that we realize all of that stuff is out the window. Like, it really is about focusing on that person and those particular symptoms and how to either manage or comfort or whatever it is that we're doing. So yeah, we have guidelines that we are trained on in a chapter of a book, and sometimes they don't even go into much detail at all with neurodegenerative diseases. I think maybe we might talk a little bit about the risk factors at play with certain things, lifestyle habits, environmental issues, etc., that could potentially create, but it's really hard to figure out, as you mentioned, what the onset is, what causes these things, and then how somebody is going to be dealing with that. And I say this all, George, because as a dietitian, we focus so much on helping people make sure that they stay nourished. So in the case of your mom, if you know how far back or when you first started getting involved, do you know how she was able to do just like activities of daily living? Was she able to cook and feed herself? Or how soon did you maybe have to get some assistance for her?
I love that question because it brings up areas that a lot of shows don't talk about and dieting. So to answer your question and also add to it, there's a lot more research today than there was 15 years ago. They do say that diet could be a potential, like the factor. My mother's gut was destroyed. Obviously, it was a lot of the medications. But dieting, in my opinion, today is critical, and also movement. We find that if you do 45 minutes a day, whether you have PD or not, exercise can slow the progression. Unfortunately, when we discovered this, it was really too late for my mother. She was kind of gone. Even when the last year I'm in Florida, we were really, in a way, lucky. I don't know how lucky that is, but to apply and be allowed to have hospice long term, which they just started. Normally, I don't know, again, I'm not an expert in hospice. I've tried to interview a lot of people. It's a tough topic that I want to talk about. Many don't, but it's usually like a week or a few days, and that's it. My mother was a year. So the good thing with that was, they brought real nurses, like literal clinician nurses, once in a while to come in, check on us, and I had a number to call 24/7 for emergency. But the downfall, which I still don't understand, is they do not allow physical therapy. And as you know, when you take away, like my mother in our case, her car keys, because I thought she could harm herself or others, when you take away therapy, it takes away hope, and it takes away their independence. So those are some of the tragic areas. To focus more on your question, she had a good diet. I even tried Ensure for a while because she had been losing weight drastically, but there was some point towards the end I just said, and I don't want to curse, but F it. And I wanted her to kind of be happy. And we bought her some of her favorite chocolate cake and anything she wanted on the grocery list. Because, the worst thing, even looking back, we were, again, for the 50th time told, you don't die of Parkinson's. So I'm sitting here hand in hand, holding my mother's hand, seeing her deteriorate in front of me. And I didn't know she was going to die from this because I was told you don't, but she did, because she was only 69. And I feel like she was robbed of 20 years of her life, and then 20 or even 15 after life. And a weird part of my brain, even today, thinks that maybe when she turned 85, if she was here, I will rest a little easier. But until then, I'm not going to stop fighting for a cure.
Mm. Yeah, what you speak about too with the challenges and complications of certain, really any complication, any condition that can degenerate or progress. So I mentioned to you my mom, I've shared plenty of times on this podcast. My mom has given me the okay to share her health conditions. So she has chronic kidney disease. Chronic kidney disease goes through many stages. Stage 5 is end stage, where you start talking about dialysis or a transplant, depending on who you are and how old you are and or your current quality of life. But the issue that I'm going to discuss about that is that leading into it, sometimes you're not diagnosed until it's too late. So in your mom's case, you mentioned too of her not being believed, because a lot of times that is unfortunately the case, sometimes with women, sometimes with people of color. They get dismissed like, oh, it's probably stress, or take a nap, or or like the tingling sensation is something else. And so in my mom's case, she was put on a heavy regimen of medicines to help manage her high blood pressure, and never sent to a dietitian ever, which is one of the things that I didn't know, because I'm a second career dietitian. So I didn't know anything about the role that food might have played in helping her that manage her high blood pressure. So, here we go, flash forward a few decades later, and that medicine had exacerbated the condition in her kidneys, because kidneys and livers are what metabolizes pharmaceuticals. And so it was already stage 3 by the time she got diagnosed. And so, what you were talking about too, of the management of it, the progression of it, if only we knew, who's to quote unquote blame. And sadly, I think in the healthcare system in this country, which I don't want to go off on a tangent about, but it does feel like it's only when they hit hospice that they get all the care that they need, when it's the end of their lives, and supporting them. And we've been looking up some information too, just, to prepare. But you also talked about the gut and brain connection too. My understanding, because I've done some research in gut health, and it comes up a lot of this too, the vagus nerve, right? So the central nervous system is what George and I are kind of discussing here. And I've mentioned this on some of the other episodes, where it's a bi-directional relationship, or a conversation that your body has. So if you have some dysbiosis in your gut, right? If you're dealing with like overgrowth of bacteria, or you're struggling with some sort like digestive issues, or you have Crohn's disease or IBS, you can suffer also then from brain fog, or it might put you more at risk for having some neurodegenerative disorders later down the line, and vice versa. If you're constantly stressed up in your brain, if you're constantly struggling with trying to think of things, or you have a lot of brain related issues or diagnoses of that, it can end up messing with your gut, in addition to what George just mentioned about taking the medicines, because then you're also throwing off the thing that helps you with your immune system. So it's such, it's like this And George, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like there's this like, benefits and risks that you're constantly playing. So you mentioned too with liberalizing your mom's diet, 100%, like all of the, nutritional approaches go out the window. We just want people to be comfortable and eating, like getting calories in. However you want a Big Mac, have a Big Mac. You want, the cake, you have a cake. So share with us a little bit about what were some of your discussions with the healthcare providers as you started learning? Because you came from not knowing anything, even thinking completely differently of how this would turn out. What were some of the conversations that you had then that maybe some of us who are going through it now could have that in our arsenal?
I was kind of frustrated. Again, we visited 7 to 10 doctors just because no one really can tell you what to do. Problem with, again, Parkinson's, there's a lot of problems, but you can't, there's no test to see if you have Parkinson's. It's basically what doctors do is rule out other things. So they'll look for other symptoms of other diseases or, viruses or who knows, but then they kind of narrow it down. I reckon, again, I'm a PhD, I'm not a medical doctor, so I only speak from my experiences. I always tell everyone to see a movement specialist. No offense to the specialist, but I don't understand how they even have something called like Parkinson specialists when they really can't do anything except for provide medicines like carbidopa, levodopa, which might slow the movements down, but that's not going to slow the disease. So it's a big problem out there. You mentioned is misdiagnosis. So there's a lot of issues like people have signs. It's called Parkinsonians, where they have signs of Parkinson's, but it's not Parkinson's disease. So guess what? If they're prescribed the wrong medicine, that's going to cause major havoc. It's still happening today. The other thing is not being diagnosed early enough. I believe my mother might have been, but she didn't want to be a burden for some reason to me and my family. So we never even really, she said Parkinson's. I'm like, what is that? And we just moved on because she was able to still drive and have a life and shop and do groceries. I never noticed any problem till, again, the stiffness of the arm started getting worse. One time in the restaurant, we had to cut her food, but she still could drive and do things. So she just hid a lot of it until that day when the 4th year before she passed, when, tragedy occurred, and we could have lost her that day. And I don't know if I would have been on this journey. So I try to take the negative and the darkness and shed light on it. That I've been able to have an honor to meet so many incredible people like you, your audience, and all those I've had the honor to meet and speak to around the world. I've really, if you go to TogetherForSharon.com, click the word interviews. I've interviewed over 600 people throughout the world, from Africa to Asia to, I mean, it's crazy how I thought I'd have like one person, but France, Italy, Spain, you name it, Indonesia. I never even heard of some of these countries, but there are people there with Parkinson's, and it kind of broke my heart. And today I believe that the only journey that really troubles me is the one that I'm not aware of, because like you, we need to stand up, speak out, and voice our opinions, our hopes, because other people might not be able to.
You have said a few mouthfuls there. The first thing that I want to touch upon is recognizing patterns. So this is something that I've been talking to my mom about as well. If something happens, like you have tummy trouble or you feel a little dizzy, every once in a while, maybe whatever happens, happens, but just make a note of that, because when we start seeing things happen a little bit more consistently, then that's documentation, and then we can bring that. And I, as a healthcare provider myself, when I'm in sessions with people, I am amazed at how few, if I would say venture to say like negative 0.1, people bring notepads with them or notes with them or take notes from what I'm saying. It's really upsetting to me that I think maybe they believe the healthcare provider is just going to share everything. But I'm like, no, you as the patient have to play an active role in this discussion, because I only have the guidance based on the condition or the age range or whatever, but you're coming with these very specific, specific lived experience things that you can document and share with me, and then we can gauge and alter as needed. And it's kind of sometimes a trial and error, which can be a little bit frustrating. And the second thing you mentioned too is the sense of community. So even if I have a friend of mine who has a kind of a rare lung disease. Even with rare diseases or rare conditions, because of the internet, Facebook groups, forums online, if you just type in something, I'm sure you can find an organization that does research and there's probably a link to a resource or a community group. So I really want to make sure that people do feel that they're not alone with things, because it can feel like you're struggling. And of course, that's, the onus is on us as the the caregivers to make sure that we are reaching out for help, support, and figuring out how do I navigate this new normal or this new abnormal that's happening in my life. So where do you feel like you got the most support, George, aside from, these conversations you were having with, I mean, globally, but how did that get to where it was? Like, how did you go from not knowing anything to all of a sudden having, a global population of people supporting you?
We start TogetherForSharon.com. Again, it's completely free. I do like tireless hours free, and I do not accept money. But I decided to start it because I felt completely alone when I was a caregiver. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of organization, but I was completely couldn't find them. Even today, I'm shocked that when I do ask people if can I interview them, they're shocked back that I don't want anything. Like they're waiting for like, but wait, there's more like Shark Tank. But there's no catch. I don't charge. I have to like literally say, I don't want you to pay me. I don't want anything except a cure. But I'll still have people tentative because in 2024, I guess you still can't do nice things for other people. But I do it in a selfish way in the name of in memory of my mother. So that's really my reason for doing everything. Again, I told you I feel she was robbed of half her life or more. And I think it's not unfair to keep her remembered just so that other people remember her, see her, and realize that Parkinson doesn't define you. And we have so many better good memories before pre-Parkinson's that I'll never forget, like dancing. And I don't want to get too emotional because this stuff is tough, but dancing the mother, daughter, son dance at my wedding. How did I have support? Well, today I'm honored to say it's you and all your viewers and all the people I meet that keep me going. I'm still grieving. Some days I do these. I'm 6'2", 200-pound guy. Worked out my whole life in police, but I go in the other room to my office, and then my number one support has been my wife. We have 3 children, but she's always been right by my side. I'm really so excited that I'm hoping in a month or two we'll be releasing my first book on this. I've written books, but not on Parkinson, and it's literally a journey. I can't say much because I get yelled at for, you don't want to jinx it, but I'm so excited. I just finished reading the manuscript, sent it into the editor. When they get it back, it's really going to be, I'm going to self-publish because I looked into all that. But again, we're not doing it for money. I don't care if I sell 1 or 2. I just want one more person to know my mother. But my wife, the book is all about, first of all, caregiving or my mother's life. Then it goes into caregiving, then partner support, my children, trying to find AIDS because that's another podcast for, and then also about, the last week of her life. But I kept a journal, and I don't really do that a lot, but the last year of her life, I literally wrote a journal, like a few sentences every day of her decline. And something that it's going to be tough to read, but in the end of the book, it gets to my world of advocacy and, and who inspires me. But again, to that question, my wife really has been my support. I even tried therapy and things, but I didn't think it was for me. It's like talking to a stranger, and they didn't really know me, but I was always able to talk to my wife, and she has been there for me. But she also, I always say my mother was my best friend, but my mother and my wife were best friends too. And I remember I wrote the story in my book about first time they ever met, and we went to this little Chinese restaurant near my mother's house. It was like an old rinky-dink thing, like looked like from Chinatown in New York City, and it was kind of dirty, but we loved the food, and maybe that added to it. Maybe that's why we all got sick. But anyway, so the whole place was surrounded by like this old-fashioned Chinese type wallpaper, and I remember it was a cheaper place, but just so we were all together. My wife, I picked up my mother, wife sat down. They just smiled, and for that moment, you could see they're going to be just as touching best friends too. So I always hear those nightmare stories, in-laws and these, and they all hate each other. But I've been lucky.
Community support is so important, and we're definitely going to touch upon what a caregiver needs as far as making sure we're taking care of ourselves. But I want you to share, you mentioned Michael J. Fox, which is kind of, for us, the poster child of this whole discussion. You had an experience with him recently. You attended an event where he was at. Can you share with us a little bit about what that event was, the meeting of him also, and then did anything come out of that as far as advances in the disease?
Yeah, that was a rare opportunity. Basically, I don't leave the house a lot because I work tons, even weekends. But we just somehow, a friend of mine who loves actors and meets actors and actresses, that's his passion. He even has a podcast, I think, but he does this around the world. And some reason years ago, I must have told him that's so cool that you met like who knows, like people from Star Wars movies, which is cool. That I don't think I'd wait in 70-hour lines, but that's what people love. So I don't know why, but he just reached out to me on Facebook, and there's so many bad things with social media, but that's for the good. Like us meeting is the great things. But so he said, "Did you know Michael J. Fox is going to be like 2 or 3 hours from your house?" And I said, "No." So I looked at my wife and I scratched my head, and I said, "Man, I would love to meet him even for a second, just to tell him how he's my hero and how much he's done for so many people." And even now, thinking about when I met him, it's tough to talk about. But I looked at her and said, "Ah, forget it, just because I'll be dead with work. There's just no, I teach around the country. I'm a professor, but anyway, and I have the kids and family and things." So she said, "You should just do it." And I said, again, I thought about it. I'm like, he has a huge event. It's called the Team Fox Gala. And again, I just say things from my knowledge. Maybe I'm wrong, but he's missed the last three, and that's his own gala for raising money for Parkinson's Foundation research and a cure. And if he's missing those, that's not a good sign. And then just ironically, a week ago, I don't know if you saw, but he won a big award, and they had to wheel him out on a wheelchair. And I've never seen that before. So I said, "Forget it. Let's just do it." And I was going to say a curse, but I'm trying not, I don't curse much. But so we just decided I'm going to go. My daughter and my wife decided to drive with me, and they went to Disney while I went to Mr. Fox. But it was a disaster from the start. And so I was so excited. I didn't really talk about it much because you don't want to jinx it. They were driving there, and some reason we stopped for a minute, and the car battery died. And I'm like, "This is the worst experience in my." I just had the one opportunity I'll never get again, probably, and that's it. Thankfully, my police skills came in, and I was in one of the stores, and an officer was undercover, but I knew because he had, I knew what you look for. Went up to him, and he jumps out of the car, and we were able to continue our journey. I didn't mention too that I was in a boot because I recently had ankle surgery, and I had 3 ligaments fixed. So I'm rolling around in one of those scooter things. I videotaped all, and ironically, I have so many videos on YouTube. I never thought I'd be on YouTube, and that one with the scooter is one of the most viewed. So because it shows tenacity. They're not going to give up. So then my wife drops me off, and I'll fast forward, and I'm just rolling around. I had to do like 2 miles outside in the heat just to get to the venue. This was like a big comic thing, like a Comic Con, but I'm not a big. I loved it as a kid. So all my autographs faded yellow, and I spent millions, and they're all garbage. So anyway, I got to the event. It was hard, like I mean, with a boot, and so I just rolled around for many hours, and thankfully I got my chance. They said all these rules, but I'm an officer and a lawyer, and I said, "This is my one chance. I'm throwing rules out," and I didn't do anything bad, but I leaned over to him when I got to meet him. I told them a sentence I memorized for a week or three. I've been memorizing. Just said, "Mr. Fox, you're my hero. I want to thank you for all you do." And we started together for Sharon.com. My mother's memory, she passed, and now I knew he knew her. So that was like, wow. And then I rolled up the crinkled. You weren't allowed. I don't know where it is here, but I have bands. Like we have bands that we give for free in memory of my mother, and handed him one. And they probably didn't want me to, and he took it. And then that was it. And he said thank you, and he appreciates it. And it was like, if you ever have something in your moment, like a train just flashed by, and it went so fast. And then someone sent a picture later of other people, and the whole day and night he had the band on still. So I didn't even realize he put it on. And even in my picture, he has it on, and he's pointing to it. So it's something that meant the world to me. And the worst part, though, because that a good also was bad, is I saw him, and he was sitting down. Most of the people there were standing, like the actors and things. And again, that moment, you don't realize what's going on. But I looked at him, and I saw what Parkinson's is doing. And it brought me back to, what it did to my mother. So I left, and, still happy, but sad. I almost fell apart. I videotaped it all. And, have the better memories will last. But things like the new bill that just passed in 2023 December. It's called the National Plan to End Parkinson's Disease, and it's the first bill in U.S. history that's going to spearhead so many changes. Some of them, and it's spearheaded by the Michael J. Fox Foundation, which is why it's so incredible. I was honored to have the opportunity to speak to my congresswoman for them, and it passed overwhelmingly. And that's another great thing. It's bipartisan, so we don't have to start arguing over the nonsense of politics. only 4 or 5 or 6 people voted against it, which I wanted to selfishly write to them and ask, shake them, but I don't think they knew what it was or just don't know, they're not aware, which is a problem. But it'll dramatically increase research for funding, which will get to your question. Developing effective pathways for treatments and cures, improve early diagnosis, spark new models for care, create standards to prevent Parkinson's disease, address health disparities, and enhance awareness, which is what we're doing today. But that kind of goes again with your question. Michael J. Fox has brought about $2 billion, not million, $1 billion to the cure or to advance, and unfortunately, he's doing terrible. I remember we thought about him a lot when my mother was sick, because if he wasn't doing better, I knew that it wasn't going to be great for us because we didn't have that exposure or money. But I know they made last year, and again, I'm not a scientist, but groundbreaking research called the biomarker, and that it's like a needle, I believe, in your spine, which sounds horrible, but since I had so many spine surgeries, it actually sounds simple. So, but that's going to it'll help determine if somebody has Parkinson's or not. And that's the first time I've even ever heard of that. So yes, there are advances. Unfortunately, it's too late for my mom and my family, but I do this for everyone else out there who now I consider family and inspire me to keep pushing, keep fighting, even on Saturday morning when people are sleeping, doing other stuff. But I can't sleep many nights, as you might see if you follow me on too many social medias. I never thought I'd even have one. But then to conclude, TogetherForSharon.com again was started in my mother's memory, and it's just a lot of resources, but all in one spot, completely free, has interviews, but more importantly, it's a resource to remember my mother as well, and that's what I hope lives on forever. But then I thought about it, and my dream is not to ask my daughter, who's now 11, who was 7 at the time, to continue it on, because I want it to end. I want the site to end. It's the only person you'll speak to that doesn't want your website to continue, because I want a cure.
Well, you have really taken us quite on the emotional roller coaster there, from the comedy of the unfortunate incident with your tire and also having to zoom around in the heat, but also, like you said, kind of like the anticipation of getting to meet a hero, and also the amount of years and energy that you've placed into this advocacy, this organization, and then going to this event, and then also seeing, like, visually seeing somebody who is a representative of what the disease can do and can happen. And it's just all so much. So it totally makes sense that you might have needed to break down, or just, had a moment to yourself after all of that was said and done, because it really does. It takes you on a bit of a roller coaster there. And it's, the social media part of it too, whether, so for anyone listening to this, whether you're, scrolling incessantly just because you want to waste time, and or maybe, forego the pain and suffering that is the world right now, or like in the case of George and myself as well, we have like a message and a mission that we're trying to do. We're trying to be of service to people, and we just want to share and educate. It becomes something that you cannot let go of, right? Like you said, I think like you don't sleep because you're thinking of things. You're in the shower and you're thinking of things. You're getting from point A to point B, and you're coming up with things. I have notes and lists and half recorded messages to myself that just, it's almost like there's too much. But what you just said really resonated with me, because the goal is to end, or to have some sort of end result of like, we have done our part. This is amazing. We don't have to worry about, in your case, Parkinson's disease, in my case, food insecurity, disparities, malnutrition one day, hopefully. But it's a very tricky situation, and to hang on to being an advocate for that can really take a toll. So let's talk about the role that the caregiver plays, and how you have to, it might be difficult if anybody out there is listening, whether you're caregiving, for those of us in the 40 and 50 decades of our life, or I should say the fourth and fifth decade of our life, we're called the sandwich generation. Sometimes we're taking care of children, and we're also taking care of our parents. So George, what is a typical week in the life of you, with the amount of stuff that you have going on, meetings, recording things, etc.? And then where do you fit in, if at all, quality time with yourself? Like, how do you engage in forms of self-care?
Yeah, I think this helps me a lot, even though it's not really what it was probably meant for. It's more about awareness, but it helps me because we're bringing my mother up. We're talking about it. It's not easy sometimes. Even now, I sound like caught myself once or twice, but that means you're incredible. So thank you, because I love the questions, and areas. A lot of people need to do the time that you put in before, which means a lot. I think unfortunately my time is, it's like I think the biggest downfall right now, and I like to be honest, is I don't know how to say no. Like some things I need to start saying no. Just the other day, a big organization asked me to do something like they like review applications for people who want to like gain money and funding for their organizations to promote awareness, and I thought that would be like a dream within my background, but I have to say really no, because I'm trying to get my book published. So it's, and the book is not easy. I mean, I spent this week probably 100 hours just rereading it because it's done. And it's really great because I can't wait till it's out, because what my dream now is I'm a lawyer, so we're going to, obviously copyright it, but I want to publish it to the Library of Congress and take my children to DC. And if I can find it in there, in the library, to show them that their grandmother will never be forgotten. So that's the next big step, and I'll probably film it all. I brought them to DC once, and thankfully there was no chaos going on that week. But you have to plan your trip there properly. I'm also a lawyer in DC, but some of the things that it's tough. I wrote again my journal that year. If anyone really wants to go deep, dark, and see the happiness for a moment, the sadness, the frustration, the anger, feeling of quitting everything, giving up, the feeling I kept my mother at her own home, and then eventually she was gonna move in with us, which we didn't get to ever have come true. But I tell the deepest, darkest secrets in that last year. And it might be a few sentences every day, but it tracks the last year until her last breath. And I'm glad I did it, because I wouldn't have been able, a book would have been nice, but taking you right into it, you'll never see, I think, a caregiving story from a male perspective, which I was shocked to find out there's not a lot of male caregivers. So I've been being asked to do summits and things, and I do them, but it's too much right now. So, but I was shocked to find out that there's no male caregivers. I didn't even realize it. And honestly, I did a lot of research, and I always could be wrong, but I didn't see one son who lost their loved one, mother, to Parkinson's, a book about it anywhere in the world. So this is literally going to be history. And again, I don't care about the money. We've donated over $15,000 to $16,000 of our own family money into different foundations. If you go to TogetherForSharon.com, click donations, you'll see organizations like the Michael J. Fox Foundation, the American Parkinson's Disease Association, Drive Toward a Cure, just places that I found important. And none of them go to me. They all are direct links from their organizations. Has a picture in memory of my mother. So it says it's in memory of my mother, but it's donation to the cure for Parkinson's. So none of it goes to us. I'm not a foundation. I'm just a son who lost their loved one, best friend, mother to this disease. And, those are some of the things that mean the world. But the book's going to be better because I have so much to say, and we never have the time. But people now can pick it up on their own, read it. But it goes through, everything you said. It talks about symptoms associated with it, goes over, and this is the first time I'm actually ever discussing the book. I'm going to do my primary caregiving. I'm just saying it because it literally goes, then it goes over my support for my wife, my children, caregiver, finding aides. We had to spend $12,000 a month the last year to have not really aides, but I called in a weird way babysitters, because my mother couldn't sleep at night because of her stomach. She had to have enemas and things that are so horrifying that I'm a male caregiver and I couldn't help her with. And those people didn't even know anything about Parkinson's. So we talk about how I had to fire like 30 companies and hundreds of aides. One aide I didn't want my mother to fall. That was it. I didn't care about anything. And this one lady a caregiver brought her to her home to pick up things and supply. I'm like, some of the stuff is shocking, and I share it all. So if you want the kind of honest truth about the whole world of caregiving, you want to definitely get this book. And finally, I talk about, great caregiving, the last week of mom's life. Family and her friends all wrote passages, like hundreds of her friends, and then in the aftermath. And again, what we're talking about today is my mission forward, and that's just keeping her memory alive forever, and helping save so many other lives. This fight's not about me anymore; it's about everyone. And the great thing again about social media is I discovered an organization called the World Parkinson's Congress 1 year ago, and they have every 2 years they have a convention. It's like, if you imagine your favorite sport, or like where they've convention. This is for Parkinson's community. The only one like it. They had it in Barcelona, Spain, and Paul McCarthy. I'm thinking of John Lennon, but Paul McCarthy spoke with again, and that's pretty powerful. So he has a connection to Parkinson. He doesn't have it, but probably a loved one. So they have it. I think the next time is going to be 2025 in the U.S. So I'll probably try and attend. I had back surgery at the time I couldn't make it. But the point is, it's because of social media. I discovered this amazing organization, and I was able to reach the world because of them. And they need more awareness. I've been trying to, interview them to help them, but I don't know why. Some of them are just still struggle to get out there. And I'm trying to explain. I lost my mother, 3, 4 years ago. I didn't even know about your organization. Now I do, and I'm promoting it literally for free. I don't want anything. Why wouldn't you want to be also on board? And the only way we're going to find a cure is if I can reach people like you and your viewers, because we need to also have people who don't have Parkinson's and people who are not aware in this fight, or we're going to be further from a cure. And again, finally, I don't have Parkinson's, and I'm not currently a caregiver of someone living with Parkinson's, so I'm in what I feel a weird world on my own right now. And that's the toughest part about all this, because it's almost like you still feel you're not welcome, even though you went through all the same things. And I find, just like earlier we talked about family members of homicide victims, they're known as secondary victims. I find myself, I coined the term, I think, like I had secondary Parkinson's, because although I didn't have the actual symptoms, I mean, I experienced every single one right by my mother's side, and we need our voices heard too.
Absolutely. And I want to just side note that on a sec for a second here, because in the world in which I work, where I started off working with high risk pregnancies, and a lot of questions I got were, oh, do you have children? And I'm like, no, I've never had a kid in my life. And how would I know what to go through? I'm like, I don't, but I'm very interested in this situation and this condition, and being able to utilize my knowledge as a registered dietitian and support you in what you need. I don't necessarily have to have the condition. And I can also list a variety of other conditions that I do not suffer from, but I'm still very much aware of the role that I can play to help support somebody manage them, or even put them in touch with resources that they didn't know, right? So now that we're having this discussion, if I happen to speak with somebody who, just as a side note, says that they're stressing out about having to take care of their parent who is dealing with Parkinson's disease, I'm like, but bam, see what I just did? I was able to connect the dots. So people around the world, let's make sure, it takes a village, but it also takes your ability to say yes to things, agree to things, or at least just allow some openness and some freedom there. You mentioned too before, George, about journaling. I know a lot of people, myself included, sometimes we keep the cards close, but there really is strength in vulnerability. And if we are able to pour out our thoughts, or just speak a little bit to whatever we're going through, again, that domino effect or that butterfly effect happens. And then we don't know who we might be able to connect or affect, who benefits from what we're discussing, the support that we receive, and vice versa, right? Like, even all that you've been through, it must also feel really good to know that you're receiving some of that gratitude and that graciousness and that generosity from other people who are dealing with this situation as well, from around the world. So, George, with as we're wrapping up, coming towards the end of our discussion here, I feel like we covered so much, but is there anything that I maybe forgot to ask you, or anything that you want to share that did not come up organically in our discussion?
I mean, TogetherForSharon.com is really the main goal, and again, we don't want anything in return. But every morning, every morning I wake up, like, I don't know if you can see, this is a individual. Her name's Christine and Meldrum, and she actually wrote a book recently. You would love her, about exercise and managing and reducing Parkinson's symptoms. But the point is, every morning I wake up, a new story or journey shows up on the website. Obviously, after 600, I'll probably still do it. I gotta kind of, again, cut back, just too much, but I'll probably start over. So what I'm saying is, our podcast today and our talk and all these journeys don't end after an hour or one quick look. I'm going to keep republishing them. Oh, I'm starting from number one. I'm going to go right back through, because we need to keep awareness going. And this is not, again, about it, just a discussion for a minute and goodbye. Sadly, I think it's becoming a big issue, and now Congress is waking up. Please reach out, you and your audience, to your senator. Tell them it's urgent that you support and you don't have to do anything. Just call them for 3 seconds, write a letter. But if we bombard these people, they listen. I try myself. It doesn't really work well. They're saying one senator of mine is supporting the bill, but I wanted to have a podcast with him. I'll say his name, Marco Rubio, and he said his staff, it's not him, said he's dealing with national issues. Well, wrote back, and usually I'm nice. I said my mother's passing, and the millions who are suffering are a national issue, and some of your priorities need to be fixed. So I don't. Then they said they'll give me a video, but I haven't heard. I don't even want it. So anyway, those you have to reach out. If more enough people, then if it gets to the Senate this year, the president, whoever it is, will sign to law, and then it's going to change the world forever. But if you go to TogetherForSharon.com, you'll see about us. You'll see our journey, our story, see all the interviews, places you can support to donate. Also partnerships, and that's one of the best ones. If you go to partnerships, I interviewed about 16 of the leading scientists in the world. Their interviews are up there, and all of them have contact information. So it's not even about me. You could actually, every single interview, like 600, you can reach out to the person. Somebody wrote me recently and said, I spent 10 hours on your website. I'm like, I don't want you to do that. Just, kind of brisk through it and come back. I actually, when we started, I thought it would reach 50 people, just, leave it alone. It's been, there's a little counter, a secret I'm telling everyone now, and it's on the bottom somewhere of the main page. And we've had over 35,000 people visit the page, and I don't even know how it got to that. So it's been, incredible. And finally, all the podcasts, we have our own podcast now. It's called, there's two of them. One is Together for Sharon podcast, where it's my wife and I. So it's really great because you see the female perspective of the caregiver, because she was also my mother, caregiver. And then also Q&A with Sharon's son George. It's where I go one-on-one with people, and I actually had the honor to speak to a New York congressman. So I interviewed him on the Paul Tonka or Tonko, and I interviewed him on the End Parkinson plan. And then you'll see other podcasts where ours today will go. And finally, I don't know how, but there's like a media section that, and I've done, magazines, movies. I really trying to reach celebrities, because it's not about the celebrity, just that they have so much more room to reach people. So on there, I actually had a message from Kenny G. He played a song for my mother. It's incredible. And I used to get tortured by his music as a kid, but then I started falling in love with it thanks to mom. So she would have I don't know if they died, but if she had known he did that, she would have been in shock. I also had the honor to interview one of Muhammad Ali's daughters about her caregiving, and I reached out. It's sad, but just the other day, famous comedian passed away, Richard Lewis, and I actually spoke to his agent a few weeks ago. He said, right now, Mr. Lewis can't, and now I know, why, and it's horrible, because I was going to really help him at least get his story out, even though he doesn't need me. And then also been working on, and it's been hard to get in touch with Ozzy Osbourne's son, Jack, because I wanted to speak about his caregiving. But, I send a lot of letters to media, a lot of letters to politicians, a lot to celebrities, and I get no responses. But I just feel if you don't stop, you'll never know. And I just wish I could get all these people together, because we would move the world. I can move a few people, and my voice is maybe reach some, but to be able to, work with some of them. I was invited recently, and we're going to fly. And again, it's hard to go places, but my wife, me and my daughter, Brooke, we're flying 27th or 29th of April for Parkinson's Awareness Month. And we're going to be walking in something called the Unity Walk in Central Park, New York, which is going to be like really touching. Everybody around the world just gathers. It's the 30th anniversary. They almost stopped it because of COVID. It was run by an organization, but the Michael J. Fox Foundation picked it up, thankfully, and they're going to have that in April. I hope I make it and survive, because it's Parkinson's Awareness Month. I'm now doing a walk for Parkinson's Foundation. We have a table, an event in March, the end of this month, for Michael J. Fox in Hollywood, Florida. We're also going to be at something incredible next Saturday night. I'll try and go live. It's called the Boca Ballet, where they actually have a little play with people with Parkinson's, and they dance with little girl ballerinas. And I did it last year. It was beautiful. It's all videotaped out, I hope, live. It's kind of tough. I have my own issues too. I have major back problems. I don't know where it came from. I had 2 major spine surgeries. I'm probably going to have to go summer for another, the last one. but it's kind of sadly, in a way, it's exciting because I actually can't do anything but post social media. So you'll see me even more. And finally, I just really honored that we got to speak. I have so much fun because I do a lot of talks, but your questions are just incredible. So for your listeners, you're all lucky to have Dina. And then finally, I always end with this. This is for you, for your family, and it doesn't matter what disease, it's for everyone. We love you, we support you, we care about you, and you're never alone. We're family in this fight. I will advocate along with Dina for you, and together our voices are so much stronger. And in a kind of joking way, I always end it with, I'm just getting started, because obviously I've been doing it for a few years, but every morning again, I wake up, I get to speak to an honor to you and your audience, or some of the journeys I've met, and so many more out there that I just can't reach. So we feel free to always reach out to me. But again, I'm just getting started. Until there's a cure for Parkinson's disease, you're not going to stop seeing me. Hopefully, it's a good reason. But again, we send our love and thank you all.
George, that is no small feat to have 35,000 people visiting your website. And also, like you mentioned kind of in the beginning of our conversation, of not having resources for yourself. Now you have become the landing page with resources and links and things that you just are also kind of archiving and documenting there of all the things that you have done. So, in a way, this is your legacy too, like, that you're leaving so much information that is available for so many people. And it can just take one person, but you are working in these concentric circles and external spheres of influence. And so even if every now and then a congressperson or a celebrity is unable to grant your request or make your wishes come true in that sense, I really hope that you know how much you have done, how big of a difference you have made, and how much more information is out there because of you single-handedly doing all this stuff. So thank you so much for everything that you put into this awareness, advocacy, and perseverance. Again, no small feat. Okay, so I'm technically related to food, so I got to end my episodes with a food-related question. But it's a two-parter, pun intended question here, George. So after we disconnect, what is on your plate today? What is it that you're working on next? And what are you eating next?
This morning I had Crispix because I don't have. I put in a cup. I don't have time to eat. I buy this healthy food place. They make 10 meals a week, and kind of getting sick of it. So this week I'm skipping it, but that means I probably won't eat at all. I have sushi too. I'm a big sushi fan. But and then the rest of the day I'm actually excited because I usually don't take any time, but taking my daughter to the Miami Heat basketball game. We're sitting like in the front row. We've never done that before. But I always, she loves basketball, I guess. My sons don't even like it. My daughter used to play. She was, she's amazing. And I see a little bit my mother in her. Some bad things, obviously, Parkinson, but in my book too, I try to remember the good times. And I end the book with a teaser or a note just saying that, Parkinson's will never take the good times away from anyone. So the last thing, everyone out there going through the diagnosis, or maybe now I'm hearing people I don't have it, or their relative doesn't have it, but their neighbor does, and the cousin, and now the mailman or the truck. It's just spreading for some reason, and all we could do is keep hope alive that we'll have a cure and end this disease forever.
Well, and like you said too, because it's a condition, a diagnosis of a ruling out of something, that the more, just like celiac disease was like that a while ago, people weren't exactly sure what it was, and the more people complained about something, the more things were developed, and then a test became the thing. And so now we can diagnose certain things like that. So same thing in this case too, the more people that are aware of it, now you're starting to maybe pay attention to some of those nuances or those patterns that we were talking about before that occur, that that seems a little off, and just documenting all of that. George, thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing so much of your personal journey, your mom's legacy as well. And I am really so very grateful, especially on a Saturday, as we said, to be spending time with each other here. And I look forward to being a part of your family and having this message continue moving on. And we will see each other again soon, either in real life when you're in New York City or on the social media world. Thank you, George.
No problem. Thank you all. Thanks.